Hello, welcome back to another SwansCast match preview. Going into game week 4 of the championship season, and Swansea will be heading away to West Brom on the eve of the transfer deadline. So some of the discussion of this video, might be outdated by the time it's watched or by the time the game is played or whatever. So take that with a pinch of salt. But I am joined with Chris from Albion Analysis. So thank you very much for joining me, Chris.
No problem at all, mate. And just my apologies for my get up. I have just got off the exercise bike. I don't normally rock around the house in a vest. I'm not that Rab C. Nesbitt, but yeah, you've caught me in my gym attire.
It's all good. It's all good. And those listening on Spotify are definitely going to want to head over to YouTube now to check out what you're referring to.
They really don't. I've got to be honest. It ain't an oil painting, guys. Stick to audio only if you're there.
Brilliant. Do you want to just let all of the listeners and viewers know where they can maybe find some of your stuff if they want to check out more ahead of this game?
Absolutely, yeah. Albion Analysis. We are on X. We're also a podcast. We tend to be post-match rather than pre-match. We don't do a great deal of pre-match previews. But if for whatever reason you want to hear what the Albion side of the game on Saturday is after the game, our podcast is normally out around Sunday evening, early doors Monday, and we're also on Substack, and there's a load of content there, previews of sort of how we view the Swans and also how the Albion are shaping up. So again, if you want to have a look at that, you're more than welcome to do so.
Brilliant. So go and check that out. But let's get into today's video. So first of all, I just want to touch on last season, not in too much detail, but how did last season go for yourselves? And then compared to what maybe expectations you had, how did you finalize the season? And was it sort of in check with what you expected, or better or worse?
Oh, better. Definitely better. Look, we were... off the field, we were a massive mess at the start of last season. We had an owner who, I mean, I'd say he wasn't interested, but it was even worse than that. He was taking money out of the club. He'd paid himself loans, which he'd missed multiple deadlines to pay back. There was genuine concerns about the club being asset stripped. That there was floated around was the possibility of selling the training ground, the ground. They'd both been put up as collateral against a loan from MSD Holdings. So we had a lot of problems off the pitch. And pretty much last summer, every player, it seemed, had a price. I mean, I know every player's got a price, but that price wasn't particularly high last summer. And I think we kind of thought, what kind of squad are we going to go into the season with? There was concerns over Corbrand going. Leeds had come sniffing again. And, it could have been really, really bad. As it turned out, Corbrand stayed. Mark Miles, the newly installed chief exec, did a really, really good job of not letting us become a bargain bucket and teams pick off our players for cheap. He basically said, if you want our players, you pay the going rate, which, given that he didn't know whether a takeover was going to go through, was a risk, because he could have just put money in the pot, which would have been the easy thing to do, but he didn't. And he gave Corbrand a chance. And in the end, we got the takeover through early on in the new year with Shilan Patel, who, it's early days, but seems an absolute breath of fresh air compared to what we had went through over 7 years with Gauchon Lai, who was just an unmitigated disaster. And on the pitch, Corbrand just, despite having £0 to spend, somehow took us all the way to the playoff semi-finals. No shame at all in getting beat by Southampton. I think everyone accepts that there was 4 teams last season that were a heck of a lot better than everybody else and were streets ahead. We got beat by one of them. There's no shame in that. The bottom line is, from our point of view, there was a division of 4 last season, and we came top of the division below that. And I think that's a massive, massive achievement.
Yeah, definitely. And I know from our games against you last season, they were both quite tight. I think it was 3-2 and 1-0. But it was a good result for us on the return. When you came down here, at the time from where we were, that was a really positive result for us. I think it's probably one of your more lackluster performances, perhaps, for how the season finished for you. Maybe we caught you on an off day, But
I think we were crying out for new additions around then. It was kind of we were just desperate for some new blood, and we lost a couple of games on the road around that time. We lost to Middlesbrough as well with an equally lackluster display, and and we went to Norwich and were really poor as well. But we got in the likes of Mikey Johnston, Andreas Weimann, and a couple of others. We did pep ourselves up a little bit. So I think we were a small squad that was really, really tired and stretched going into that sort of Christmas, New Year period. And you definitely caught us at a decent time because we weren't at it.
That's fair enough. Okay, so let's go to this season. How do you think the expectations either change, or do you think they continue over? Do you expect to maybe pick up where you left off and challenging for the playoffs again?
It's a tricky. I mean, where the expectations are is almost always high at Albion, because you, especially, and this is not me being a grumpy old man, but there's a lot of the younger supporters can only remember a time when Albion either challenged at the very top end of the Championship or were in the Premier League. They're the only two things they really remember.
I was going to say, I think his lately yo-yo club comes to mind a little bit, the term.
Yeah, but I mean, we get labelled that, but I think it was 7-8 years we had straight in the Premier League. So probably a little bit unfair that we get labelled that, because we had a yo-yo period of a few years when we initially went up under Gary Megson, and then again under Gary Megson again, then under Tony Mowbray, then Roberto Di Matteo. That was fair enough. But after that promotion under Di Matteo, we stabilised and stayed in the Premier League for quite some time. So I don't really have that just because we've had one promotion and immediate relegation in recent years. But I think there's an expectation amongst the fans that we should be a Premier League club. I think the older fans, of which, at 41, I wouldn't say I'm at the older end, but I'm certainly old enough to remember the dark days of the early 90s. I was 18 years old before I ever saw a top flight West Bromwich Albion. So I think. I think those of us who remember the darker days realise where it can go without your football club being run properly. And I think we're just glad to have a football club that is stable. And I think that's the big thing for most Albion fans. Whatever happens on the pitch, I think it's financial security. Because genuinely, Luke, this time last year, we weren't convinced that we were going to finish the season with a football club. Like, genuinely, it was getting that bad. I think we were really, really worried that we could go the ways of Bolton's, Derby's, or even worse than that. Go the ways of Bury's and Macclesfields. You know what I mean? It was really getting that bad. So I think there's a little bit of everything is a bonus. But that having been said, we've started the season really well, which obviously ramps up expectations. We're talking on Wednesday evening at about 7:45, where news has dropped that we've had a bid accepted for Mikey Johnston, and Albion Twitter next to me is absolutely blowing up with full-on excitement. And if that goes through, you can only... I don't even know what you're going to encounter on Saturday, but it is going to be an excitement level which, frankly, we haven't seen at the Hawthorns for a really, really long time.
I mean, it's always great when you get some signings and everyone's on board and going in the right direction, especially after a tough time. Historically, I guess I could argue the same thing in regards to older Swansea fans remember those times that weren't so good. Maybe more younger, more modern Swansea fans remember a time in the Premier League and the expectations change based on what era you perhaps know the club from. But I do like to remind quite often on the podcast how there's a bit of discontent with our current ownership. And I'm not saying they're perfect, but when you see what happened to, like, yourselves last summer, it should be a reminder that, it's not as bad as what it could be, because we are by no means in that boat right now. There's frustrations about the money being spent, but the stuff that you described, that's another level of worry. And I think, that's when it hits home about your football club.
Well, that's it, Luke.
Disappearing potentially.
Yeah, and it's worth saying that, you know, football fans always want another player and another player and another player, and probably so do managers. But whilst in the end, the problems were caused at our club by um, the problems were sort of compounded by Gauchon Lai pulling his investments and actually taking money out of the club and everything. In reality, what got us into this situation? It wasn't not spending money; it was spending money incredibly badly. I mean, you know, we bought Ken Zahor from them down the road from you for an extortionate fee.
Good
And
signing that
stuck,
was, yeah.
oh God, don't get me started. And stuck him on a long-term contract. There was Ollie Burke. There was you know there was so many bad signings, and even the players that have been quite good, like Okay Koslu, John Swift, Jed Wallace. You can argue we couldn't afford those contracts. I understand why football fans always want their club to spend and always want their club to progress, but the financial reality of chasing that Premier League dream for clubs who don't have parachute payments, who are of a certain size, who don't have rich investment or owners like, for example, Stoke have with with the Coates family and stuff like
Yeah.
that. It's so dangerous. And sometimes as football fans, we maybe have to take a step back and say, am I going to be happy for a bit of mid-table consolidation just to make sure that my children and my children's children have a football club to support?
Yeah, and I think that's what's important, really. Ultimately, everyone wants to be able to go every week for however long, and I think you take for granted that day that that's not there, and that's what's important. There's been too many cases of it recently, and you hear more every now and again of bad, sad cases, and yeah, it needs to not be a thing. But unfortunately, for those that have experienced it, they'll always, I guess, tell you you only realize when it's gone. But let's move on more to more positives then, and it's obviously on the upward trend for you guys now. So this summer, what changes have you had in the club, transfers or behind the scenes? Anything you think is important to kind of going into this year, really?
Where to start? We've turned over the whole squad pretty much. No, well, it's crazy. We've turned over a heck of a lot of players, yet in the opening 3 games, we've actually only started with one new signing, which has been Hegem at left back. So we've turned over loads of players, and there's a number of players who've come back into the fore. So first team players have gone, such as Connor Townsend, Okay Koslu, Cedric Kipre, Brandon Thomas Asante, and taking their place have been players who were injured last season in the likes of Malumbi and Maja, or Ajayi, who played a bit part, or Grant, who was out on loan at Cardiff. Again, them up the road. And the only real new addition that's been a regular starter has been Hegem, who we signed from the Swedish league, who's been excellent, to be fair. But I mean, once you start looking at the bench, it's a completely new Albion. Like most of the fringe players have moved on, and we're still doing bits of business. I mean, obviously, as I say, we're recording this on Wednesday with a couple of days of the window to go. There have been multiple bids for Tom Fellows, and I think all Albion fans really, really hope he doesn't end up going anywhere. You will obviously, by the time you're probably listening to this, you'll probably know the answer to that, whether he's going or whether he's staying. He has been our best player this season. There's no denying that. He's top of the championship assist chart. He's been an absolute menace. He is a quality footballer. And I really, really hope that when the window closes on Friday, that he's still a West Bromwich Albion player. But, you know, teams are coming knocking with, I mean, they've took the Michael a bit with offers of £10 million. And from what I understand, 15 has been rebuffed as well. But I think if we start getting into the realms of 20, it's kind of eek territory where you do start to think, are the club going to seriously consider this? At the moment, they're holding strong, but that remains to be seen. So I really hope he's lining up against you at the weekend, because an Albion without Tom Fellows is a completely different prospect to an Albion with Tom Fellows.
I mean, from a Swansea perspective, I don't want you to lose your best players, but if he's not there, sorry, not really going to complain. Going into this game then, obviously we saw a bit of West Brom last year. You did really well. What sort of style do you expect to see going into this one? Is it similar to what we saw last year, or has there been any changes?
No, we've changed quite a bit, really. We've been much more possession based in the early parts of the season. We've had more possession than our opponents in all of the 3 games, which, given that we've played 2 of them away and the one we've played at home was against Leeds, that's really quite impressive, to be honest with you. The build-up is much quicker because we're playing Mowat and Swift deeper, and they're picking the ball up from the defence, and it's going forward into. We don't really play with a 9. Maja sort of drops into the 10 and picks the ball up from the midfielders, and then the sort of attacking threat comes from the 2 wide players, Grant and Fellows. Obviously, Maja is the Championship's top scorer, and he is an attacking threat. Nobody's denying that. But in the build-up, he's coming deeper, and then he's getting into the box later. So we're quite a lot different. You might see a switch between 4 at the back and 3 centre halves quite a bit, because we've kind of switched between those 2 systems in game. I mean, against Leeds, we basically played 2 systems, one which was our in possession system and one that was our out of possession system. So we are a very tactically fluid team. I think Corberan has really got his style. We're a much more mobile midfield now. Without Okay Cosley was a cracking player for us, but the one thing he wasn't was terribly mobile. And Malumbi in his place has given us a much more dynamic look in midfield. I mean, look, it obviously depends on whether Fellows is still a West Bromwich Albion player, but if he is, I think we look a better side than we did last season. I think that there's more threats in the team. We move the ball better, and we haven't really missed Kipre at centre half in the because Ajayi stepped up in quite a big way. I really thought we'd miss him because he was our player of the season last season. He was unbelievable, but we haven't really. We've looked relatively solid. I mean, first half against Stoke, they cut us apart a little bit. Lewis Kumas was unbelievable, but generally speaking, we've looked reasonably solid. We didn't give Leeds a sniff. So I think it's a different Albion. It's a more mobile and fluid Albion. I think we'll look a bit different, but it's kind of hard to say because if Tom Fellows isn't there, like, that just completely changes the whole dynamic. So assuming Fellows is there, I think that's what you'll see from us. But if he's not, then Corberan's going to have to find yet another solution.
Yeah, fair enough. But I guess maybe they got some people lined up whether the worst case scenario happens or not.
Well, we got Jed Wallace out on the bench.
So there, but
yeah, we've got Jed Wallace sat on the bench. So, but he's a quality player, but he's a completely different sort of threat to Tom Fellows.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, apologies for my coughing fit there. Always that comes at the worst times, and you start speaking, you got that little tickle at the back of your throat, so couldn't get my words out. But okay, so you talked a lot about your team, your formation there. What I guess maybe I know the answer based on what you've said so far, but I always want to ask who the danger men are. But you did go into a little bit of detail. I guess that's Tom Fellows if he's still here. I say he isn't.
Absolutely.
Say he isn't here, because obviously I know you spoke a lot about him already. Who else would you be the one to sort of highlight? And from our perspective, Carl and Grant, if he's one that's started for you, just because of his previous association with Cardiff, I'm wondering if that's someone that we should be aware of.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. He is obviously 12 months in Cardiff has made him determined to never go back, because he suddenly stepped his game up, and I don't think he was particularly great for Cardiff last season from what I see, but he's been incredible at the start of this season. He really has. He's like a different player. He's come back physically very, very strong. He's playing a different sort of a role, but he's been really, really good at it. He got his first goal of the season against Stoke with a back post header where he bullied the fullback, which we never see from Carlin at all. He's working hard defensively. He's taking players on. He's carrying the ball. He's just been he's been a man transformed, to be honest with you. So he's one to look out for. And look, it would be remiss of me to not mention Josh Maja, because he's the Championship's top scorer. He got a hat-trick on opening day. He scored a brilliant goal for the winner against Stoke, and he's another one that we missed for all of last season. Thank you very much, Dan Ballard, for an absolutely filthy challenge when we went up to Sunderland. And yeah, he's just stepped back in, and again, he's another one who you just feel there's a few players in there, Maja, Malumbi, Grant, who for various reasons, and maybe Ajayi as well, who feel like they're making up for lost time. Obviously, Malumbi and Maja missed all of last season, or most of last season, through injury. Grant has just kind of wasted the last 2 years of his Albion career, one of them on loan and one of them not playing. And Ajayi just hasn't been fancied by the last couple of managers. And it feels like there's a determination from all of them to kind of make up for that and make their mark now. Their opportunity is there.
Definitely some players to watch out for. It sounds like West Brom looking good for the season so far. And arguably, maybe the top end is not going to be as competitive as last year. And if you've improved, who knows, Who knows? But flipping that question then, before we end the video, I always like to ask from our squad then, have you got any players that stand out as a worry that might do damage against yourselves?
I mean, it's hard because obviously, you kind of you're turning over your squad quite a lot, aren't you? And there's a lot of players that are kind of new, that I wouldn't necessarily say I know a great deal about. I've heard quite a lot about this centre forward though that you've brought in. Is he Slovenian? Zipanik?
Yeah, Vipotnik. Yeah,
Vipotnik. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen him, although I saw. I think it was his goal. And he looks a decent player from what I hear, and I'm interested to see him because it's always interesting when you get players coming into the division, seeing it from abroad, seeing if they can step up. I have to say, over the years, I've always been impressed by Matt Grimes. I always think he moves the ball really, really well. He's sort of like he sits in that midfield, and he just looks like. I don't mean this disrespectfully to him. I always, I think he always looks like one of those players that is just so comfortable at championship level, and I don't know. I don't necessarily think he could make the step up. Maybe that's why he hasn't. But I think he's just the sort of player that you could drop into any championship team, and he'd just look really, really comfortable. The only other one that I kind of have to just highlight, just because he seemed to win every header in that last 20 minutes at the Hawthorns, was Harry Darling, which was just the craziest end to a game.
Yeah.
Where we were.
I'd argue we perhaps could have won that game because of the headers that he was winning. I think it was one or two might have hit the post or near misses, and
it was mad.
That's a threat that we don't exploit enough, I'll be honest.
No, because we were cruising in that game, and then Charlie Patino comes on and starts putting wonderful balls into the box, and Harry Darling just starts getting on the end of absolutely everything, and I've never seen such panic. And it was bizarre because from what I gather, I mean, and I look at the data quite a lot, like Darling doesn't do that much. He just seemed to do it in the 2 games against us.
No, it was at the time when Michael Duff was a manager, he had perhaps more old-fashioned tendencies from corners, from our attack in general. So putting it on his head is probably a bit more of a tactic back then. Now we've reverted back to more of a passing-based approach under Luke Williams. It's not so much what we would look to do in terms of making our chances. So for me, it's a bit of a missed opportunity. I haven't seen that. And he did it in a few games around then as well, where you try and find him in a corner. It's something that he should do more, is score headed goals from corners and set pieces in general. But I think we just don't work with our philosophy that much at the moment. It's all about the keeping possession to make chances rather than chuck it in the box for set pieces and all that sort of stuff. So that's probably where it's died down a bit recently.
Yeah, and look, I'll be interested to see you and your evolution, because obviously we kind of. I don't know whether Edwards was your manager at the point at which we came to your place last season, and if he was, it was very early days. I think
we had the interim at the time that you came
I
to
thought
us.
you did,
We had
yeah.
Alan Sheehan, so he probably was still doing back to basic stuff to try and tick us over till we had the new guy in. So if Darling was winning those headers again, it probably would have been a bit. It's more similar to what you would have seen from us when we had Russell Martin, but probably not as.
Well, I'm not looking forward
quite
to that
where we were there yet.
Yeah, well, Russell Martin is basically Carlos Corberán's kryptonite. I think we have. I don't think he's beaten a Russell Martin side, so I hope you don't play too much like them, because
we're not quite at the same level as we were. There's a lot of teething problems still, I would say. So maybe you have it. Maybe you're right.
Good. Because we don't like playing Russell Martin football. Plus he gets our manager sent off with his petty antics. So yeah, I don't know how you guys feel about him over there in Wales, but he is pretty roundly disliked at the Hawthorns.
I have my views on him. I think he was good while he was here, but I think he's a clever man and got what he wanted out of being here. Let's just say that, because I think there's a big story there. I've been into it in detail in the podcast many times, but a lot of people do definitely love him. I respect what he did, but I think he tries blaming the board for stuff that I think he was definitely more responsible for than he likes to make out, But he's got a talker. He's a good talker in the media. He's good to get you on side, and that's probably partly why you dislike him as well, because he's probably doing those sort of things on a match day, annoying people, winding people up.
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
It to be honest, it was more the two-faced nature of him. I mean, I'll bore you with the story for 2 minutes. Basically, I don't know whether you saw the game at the Hawthorns against Southampton, but there was a ball played down the line. Corberán thought the ball was going to run out of play and instinctively poked his foot out and touched the ball. Now, there was nobody anywhere near it, but obviously Corberán did touch an in-play ball. The referee blows his whistle, gives a free kick to Southampton, and I'm pretty sure that was where the referee was going to leave it until Martin started screaming, "Send him off, send him off, send him off." And that was audible on the Sky coverage that Martin was screaming that. And in the end, the referee kind of decided he had no choice, got pressured into it, sent Corberán off. And after the game, Martin was so two-faced that he actually said, "I thought the decision from the referee was harsh." Even though he was.
This is what I mean about being able to talk to the media. This is what I mean. That's what I mean.
So that's why
he knows how to play the media to get what he wants. That's what he knows how to do.
And then there was a little thing where he after they beat us in the playoff semi-final second leg, I don't know why he felt the need to come out and say this, but he came out after. I think it's just him trying to give himself a pat on the back. But he said before the game he'd had the advertising boards move closer to the edge of the pitch, so Darnell Furlong couldn't take long throws, which was just, you've just won the game. You're going to Wembley. I'm not really sure why you need to congratulate yourself.
All right,
on
if that is a tactic, does everyone need to know just because you just won? Oh, yeah, this is why we stopped them.
Yeah.
No, obviously it's the sort of thing you love when he's your manager, but then when he's not, maybe it's annoying. And I understand that, but I just think the way that he went about his exit, very similar themes to some of those things you just described. Like I said earlier, our board's not perfect, but he was quite a catalyst in getting the fans against the board, pitying him. That's the short version of my opinion of his exit. So clever man in the media, let's just say that. But yeah, that's
him smug and self-righteous, frankly, is where I'm at with him.
That's all part of it as well. But I was just keeping it PG because there's a lot of fans who do definitely think it was one of the best times as manager for us with a manager recently. So, and I respect that because he did do well while he was here, especially with the play style. Maybe not so much with the finishing positions, but again, another story. Okay, thanks for joining me. I have one more question to end the video, which is more of a novelty question. This I tend to change it up, so if I see you later in the season, it'll be a different one. What is your best ever away day and why?
Oh, wow. There's,
Difficult one on the spot, but it will we'll get a good recount of an away day, I'm sure.
I mean, in terms of the game itself, it'd be really hard not to say beating Wolves 5-1 at the Molineux, to be honest with you. I mean, that was just, it was a glorious day. We still sing songs about it and think and everything like that. It was just, Peter Odemwingie scored a hat trick, ran off with his three fingers in the air, which was just, it's just an iconic image for all Albion fans. So I mean, that's massively up there. But just to throw one more into the mix in terms of enjoyment, and it was almost like we knew what was coming. We won 3-0 away at Bristol City in what I think was our last away game before COVID hit, and the atmosphere was incredible. There was just this sort of like party in the stands, and the players celebrating with the fans after the game. And I don't really know why it was so, the atmosphere was so incredible, other than you almost just feel like people knew that they had to get their enjoyment in before they were going to get locked in their houses and have no more football to go to for like a year. And I always just remember that game fondly, just for that moment, because that moment and videos from that day kind of just, it sustains you a little bit through COVID when you can't go to football and you have all that taken away from you. So the Wolves 5-1 for the result, but that win at Bristol City just before COVID will always be really, really special, just because it meant a lot through that tough period.
Definitely. I guess they knew what was on the cards then. So yeah, it was a case of last enjoyment for who knows how long. But thank you very much for joining me, Chris. Obviously, go check out Albion Analysis. Do you want to remind everyone where they can find your stuff?
Yeah. Like I say, we're on X. Please chuck us a follow, or if you want to tell me what rubbish I've spouted, at CJ Hall 83. And then the podcast is downloadable from wherever you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, all the usual places. And then if you want to check out our Substack, some of it is obviously behind a subscriber wall, but other bits of it is free to view. So please log on and have a look. And I'm delighted to say there'll be a wonderful article from Luke himself on there later this week. So even if you want to go on and see if you agree with his thoughts on your club,
well, tell me what I've done wrong, what I've said wrong.
There is a comment section for you to do that. So
there we are. I'll go and check it out in a week or so and see what what's been said. But no, thanks for joining me again, Chris. I'll have all our links below anyway, so if anyone's looking for it, it'll be in the description. And I guess best of luck for the rest of the season. I hope we can inflict your first defeat of the season, especially coming off the back of a bit of a lackluster South Wales derby. It'd be nice to get a bounce back, but good luck after that. I don't know if it will happen. I'm not feeling that confident, but catch you later in the season, I guess.
Yeah, like I say, reiterate that. Good luck for the rest of the season, but just not for Saturday.
Yeah, okay. Catch you in a bit. Thank you.
Cheers.